A 16-team playoff is on the table, and while 5 automatic qualifiers and 11 at-large bids would be a risky proposition for the Big 12, it's a risk I think they need to take.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. I've been covering TCU athletics for the past 12 years. Thank you for making Locked On Horned Frogs your first listen. We'll have a little preview of the Corvallis Regional in segment 2 today. We'll talk about USC, some of their heavy hitters, their best players as TCU Baseball prepares to start their postseason run Friday afternoon in the Pacific Northwest against the Trojans. If they win that, presumably, if Oregon State takes care of business, they'll play the Beavers in the winner's bracket game on Saturday. But I want to talk some football and the college football playoff format once again on today's show. And this is always an interactive show. I encourage you guys to hit me up here in the YouTube comments. You can reach out to me on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, at SimcoxSteven. I love to hear your ideas because I've said before, I'm a fan doing a podcast. I'm not an insider. I'm not going to pretend to be. These are my opinions based on the news we have in front of us. And I like to hear your opinions too. But today I especially want to hear your thoughts because the Big 12 is sitting at a crossroads right now. And there's a risk in front of them that they could take. It appears Brett Yormark is willing to take this risk. So there's been a lot of discussion around the college football playoff lately. They want to make a decision by December 1st because depending on how this goes and what happens with expansion in the format, the SEC is determining if they're going to stay at 8 conference games as they do currently or move to a 9 conference game schedule like the rest of the country, essentially. So this has been kicked around. It's been discussed. They voted on the straight seeding proposal, which I think was a big miss for the Big 12 and the ACC because it eliminates the automatic bye for conference champions. But that went through. And for a long time, there's been this idea on the table proposed by the SEC and the Big 10 of a 16-team playoff that would have a 4-4-2-2-1 structure. What does that mean? They would be proposing in that scenario 4 automatic qualifiers for the SEC, 4 automatic qualifiers for the Big 10, 2 for the ACC, 2 for the Big 12, and 1 for the group of 5, right? So that's bad news for the Big 12 in that it would limit the amount of automatic qualifiers they have. Now, there will be 3 at-large teams, so presumably everybody would have the opportunity to get a few more teams in. But as we've seen in the past, the committee really seems to favor the SEC and the Big 10, so it would tilt heavily in their favor, you would think. And the bottom line is they are automatically getting more teams in. They have that distinct advantage. Those 2 conferences would also, in that proposal, not really related to that, but on their own kind of wavelength, they would potentially have play-in games. So basically like a semifinals to the conference title game that would then determine your 4 automatic qualifiers. And then possibly get some at-large teams in there as well. Well, the counter has now been, and there seems to be some momentum from everybody on this proposal, which would be 5 automatic qualifiers. So basically your Power 4 champions, your highest ranked group of 5 champion, they all get in. And then 11 at-large bids. So the risk the Big 12 would take in that scenario is there would only be 1 guaranteed spot. There would be 11 at-large teams, but it would be up to the committee to give some of those spots to the Big 12. In last year's college football playoff poll, at the end of it, the Big 12 had 1 team in the top 16. That was Arizona State at 12. BYU was 17th. Iowa State was 18th. So last year, if we take that as an example, you would have 6 SEC teams and 1 Big 12 team. So Greg Sankey has pointed that out when he's talked about their proposal of 4 automatic qualifiers for the SEC and the Big Ten. He said, look, we don't need automatic qualifiers. If you look at last year's poll, we would have gotten 5 or 6 teams in anyway. This is us throwing you guys a bone, which obviously that's a sales pitch, right? Like he's trying to strong arm them and get them to go along with his idea. But I want to hear from you guys today because I really think this could go either way. Do you think the Big 12 should take the risk and say, you know what? We're going to put it in the committee's hands. We're going to have 11 at-large teams. And even though that could backfire on us, we don't want to limit the amount of automatic qualifiers that we can have. Or do they sort of go along with this proposal from the SEC and the Big Ten and say, okay, at least we'll have 2 guaranteed spots. And hopefully most years we could get one of those at-large bids, one of the 3 at-large bids, putting us to 3 teams in the college football playoff. Brett Yormark had this to say about it. Well, first of all, Brandon Marcello reports that Brett Yormark had a great conversation with the league's athletic directors this morning. They're aligned on their preference for a 5+11 CFP model. Big 12 coaches met with Yormark on Thursday to discuss further. Chris Vanini from The Athletic says Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark tells The Athletic he's strongly behind the 5+11 CFP, even if the league might not get 2 bids in a given year. The quote is, and that's okay, because we've got to earn it on the field. I tell my room, you're rewarded when you perform at the highest levels. So in theory, I think that's true. And okay, if the response is, hey, let's compete, right? Like, let's get out there and compete and prove that we can do this. The problem in the past has been it doesn't feel like you're getting a fair shake. I think BYU was a top 16 team in the country last season. I know the season didn't end well for them. They had some bad losses, but they should have been right there, and they weren't. So Arizona State would have been the only team in the college football playoff last year in that scenario. That being said, I think ultimately it's a risk you need to take. And here's the reason why. Even if it works out better for the SEC, at least you didn't get bullied into doing their plan once again. You know, it's fascinating. I did an episode last week when I was upset about how the ACC and the Big 12 just went along with the straight seeding plan. And they released these statements that, in my mind, I thought they were pretty weak, where they basically said, hey, you know, we're doing this for the good of college football, even though it might not benefit us. And I'm like, your job is to benefit yourselves. Like, your job as the Big 12 commissioner, Brett Yormark, is to benefit the Big 12. Your job, Jim Phillips, as the ACC commissioner, is to do what's best for the league. And so I thought that came off kind of weak. Greg Sankey this week takes a shot at both leagues and is like, I don't need these, you know, contrived statements. I don't need people to lecture me about the good of college football. So he saw those comments as a shot at him, like as a passive-aggressive complaint about the SEC and their place in college football. And I'm like, dude, you're getting what you want. Why are you complaining about this? But it's fascinating to see like the context and how everybody takes these things. But I think the Big 12 needs to take this risk because even though it might backfire on you and you're putting it in the committee's hands, which is never an idea that I love as a Big 12 fan because they've shown time and time again they don't really respect the league. Automatically giving up a couple of spots to the other conferences just seems like a really weak move. And yeah, I know you got the 3 at-large spots and you got your 2 automatic qualifiers, but I don't think long-term it will work out. But I want to hear from you guys here in the YouTube comments or on Twitter. I like that they're pushing back. I like that they're trying to be creative. And yeah, I mean, go compete. Go get it done on the field. Last season, the thing about the Big 12 moving forward that's going to be a problem, there's a lot of parity in the league. And because the SEC is perceived to be the biggest and the best, and the Big Ten is kind of right up there with them, parity in those leagues is seen as a positive thing. It's like, oh man, look at all these great schools. Anybody can beat anybody week to week. It's just great teams beating up on each other. It's kind of like Big 12 basketball was for a long time. And even to a certain extent this year, but I think in the last few seasons, definitely. You look at it as a strength. The problem for the Big 12 right now is because it's seen as a weaker league, that parity, the way it's perceived by the national media is like, well, it's just a bunch of mediocre teams. There's not one great team there. There's not more, there's not enough depth. So anybody can beat anybody just because it's bad teams playing each other, which is not true. But that's the perception. So honestly, I feel like if you're a Big 12 fan, you're hoping that TCU is really dominant, but just regardless, you're hoping somebody kind of emerges as a dominant force, at least for this season. And then you have some good teams up there with them. But I want to hear from you guys. Do you think the Big 12 should go along with this 5 automatic qualifiers plus 11 at large bids, or should they kind of take the conventional wisdom of the 4 automatic qualifiers for the SEC and the Big 10, 2 for the Big 12, but at least they have those 2, and then they get those 3 at large bids? When we come back, TCU Baseball starting their postseason run on Friday afternoon. We'll talk about it next on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Thank you to our friends at FanDuel, FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. NBA playoffs in full swing. Looks like we are headed towards an Indiana-Oklahoma City finals. If you're an Indiana fan, you might put your head in your hands right now because maybe I jinxed it. But Pacers-Thunder. Thunder already clinched the finals. Pacers need one more win to do it. You can do same-game parlays. You can do player props. It's all available at FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. They also have plenty of opportunities with college football. TCU's over-under win total, according to FanDuel, 7.5. I think you go over. If you go under, are you preparing for a new coach next season? Because I feel like that's what it would look like for Sonny Dykes. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. New customers, one $5 bet. If you win that bet, you get $200 in bonus bets. It's just $5. You win that bet, you get $200 in bonus bets. Again, same game parlays, player props, live betting. It's all there. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. Official betting partner of the NBA and proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. All right, TCU Baseball. They are taking on USC on Friday afternoon in the Corvallis Regional. If they win that game, presumably they'll play Oregon State. The 4 seed in that region is St. Mary's, which had kind of a rough year, but they got hot at the end of the season in the conference tournament and made a run. The big decision for TCU right off the bat, and I would imagine we'll get a Kirk Sarloos media session on Thursday, and we'll find out more about how he wants to approach this. But you can roll the dice in game 1 and go to Mason Brassfield, who had a really good start against Kansas. They paired him with Luis Rodriguez in long relief, and Frogs only gave up 1 run in that game. Really, the pitching in the Big 12 tournament was outstanding. I mean, I know things, they gave up 2 runs in the 9th and 10th, but they only gave up 2 runs. I mean, the problem was they just couldn't score after that first inning, and it sunk them against Arizona. But do you go with Mason Brassfield in game 1 against USC and hope that he comes through with a victory, and then you have Tommy Lepore available for that winner's bracket game, or maybe Tommy available to save your season in the loser's bracket? Or do you go with Tommy in game 1 and just keep with your usual schedule, get him out there to throw, and then hopefully, he shoves like he typically does, can go 6 or 7 innings, you win that ball game, and maybe you have more of a bullpen effort after that, but you at least lock down that first win, which is so important. Because the tricky thing is you don't have pitching depth, which means you want to win those first 2 games desperately because you don't have a ton of guys as starters who can go 5 or 6 innings, right? Now, the good news for TCU is they have some long relief arms that can make some things happen. And Luis Rodriguez and Braden Sloan. Gianluca Shin was a revelation in that Big 12 championship game. If he can come in and give you a couple innings, that'd be a huge boost. I tend to lean towards throw Brassfield in game 1 against the USC team that was a bubble team. Not that they can't win, not that they're not capable. And then have Tommy available for that hopefully winner's bracket game against Oregon State. And if he does what he can do, he'll give you a great chance to win. And then if you can win that game, you're suddenly 2-0 and you only have to win one more to move on to the Supers. But I understand that's a risk, right? You're not throwing your best arm in game one. And we'll see what USC ends up doing. Their pitching staff, they got a couple guys that have similar numbers. But I will say this, Caden Aoki has been their Friday night starter all year long. His numbers on their own don't jump off the page. He's got a 4.21 ERA. But he's had some ball games against big time opponents where he's been absolutely outstanding. He pitched against Vandy early in the year, went 7 innings, only gave up 1 run, struck out 10 against Michigan, who's a good program, 7 innings, only gave up 2 runs in that ball game. Went 6 1/3 against Nebraska, who's a tournament team. Gave up 4 runs in that game, so not his best effort. But he's had individual moments where he's pitched really, really well. Now he's also gotten knocked around at times. Against UCLA, another tourney team, 7 innings, didn't give up a run. He got knocked around by Michigan State. He got knocked around by Indiana. But in some big-time ball games, he's been really solid. So if you get the best version of him on Friday afternoon, then you can be in for a dogfight. And I feel like you got to have a short leash with Brassfield. Even though he's really good in the last ball game, you can't mess around and let him work out of trouble too much. But he pitched well against KU, and KU's got a good lineup. USC, from a hitting standpoint, Ethan Hedges is their best hitter. He hits 343 on the year, had 12 home runs, and he's a two-way player. He's also their closer. Adrian Lopez had 8 home runs, hit 337. Braden Towd, 322. He had 10 home runs this year, and then there's a little bit of a drop-off after that, but 4 guys who legitimately hit over 300 with some power. This is a pretty solid lineup. USC in the Big Ten this year, so a huge change from the Pac-12 and their West Coast teams that they were playing. But I like TCU's chances. Oregon State was 41-12. They played an outlaw independent schedule. They just scheduled who they wanted to play. Now, I don't really think they ducked anybody. They had series against Oregon this year. They had series against some Power 4 teams. And they struggled in some of those. They lost 2 out of 3 to Nebraska. They got swept by Oregon. They handled their business against a lot of West Coast teams that are solid, like Cal Poly comes to mind, San Diego, who TCU played in the opening series. Frogs swept San Diego, so did Oregon State. San Diego actually went on a really nice run in the season. It helped probably both those teams' RPIs. But I feel like there's a good chance that TCU can emerge here. It's going to come down to, do you have enough arms to fill out those innings? And then maybe even more importantly, as much as I've talked about pitching depth this year, TCU's pitching numbers are pretty solid. They've had their blow-up games here and there. Cademan Parker experiment's been sort of inconsistent. They never really had a true third starter. They kind of just hodgepodged all year long. But between Tommy Laporte's heroics and a bullpen that's been really solid, they were able to scrape together a team that put up good numbers on the mound. Hitting's been inconsistent, and I think especially against good pitching, they struggled. Well, you're going to see good arms this weekend. That's just the reality of it. So, can Sawyer Stroh-Snyder and Noah Franco and Cole Kramer and Chase Brunson, those 4 especially, that group, 2 through 5 in your lineup, they were 1 for 11 in the Big 12 championship game. That's just not going to get it done. Can those guys get going? Jack Bell and Colton Griffin, as Jack Bell's probably your leadoff hitter. Colton Griffin, I imagine, is going to hit 9th. Can those 2 guys set the table for your team? Get on base, steal bases, make things happen, put pressure on the defense, and allow those, the heart of your order to drive in runs, right? Can you be selectively aggressive on the base pass and use that to your advantage and not get, thrown down and thrown out, going to third base or going to home plate, those types of things. Big weekend ahead for TCU baseball. I like where they're at. I like their chances. And they'll be matched up with the Tallahassee Regional. So Florida State is the 1 seed in that region. Could potentially be a super regional matchup. next week. But first things first, got to take care of business. And the Corvallis Regional, again, Friday, 2 p.m. against USC. We'll come back and wrap things up. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. You can always chime in on the YouTube comments. Don't forget to tell me if you like the idea of the 5+11 college football playoff format or the proposed 4-4-2-2-1-3. Wasn't the smoothest way to get that out, but 4 automatic qualifiers for the SEC, 4 for the Big 10, 2 for the Big 12, 2 for the ACC, 1 for the Group of 5, and then 3 at large bids. But Jesus Patino, who is a frequent listener of the show, and I haven't heard from him in a while. Hey, Jesus, good to hear from you, buddy. He's predicting 12-0 for TCU football next year, which is, I mean, I love the optimism. I'm not sure about 12-0, but I do think the Frogs will be playing in Arlington for a Big 12 championship. We're going to find out a lot early. I mean, as tough as it is playing North Carolina and SMU in 2 of those first 3 games, what I like about it is we'll know right away how good this team is, right? Bill Belichick, even with all the distractions going on around UNC, great coach, and he's going to have plenty of time to hone in on what TCU does well. I think that's the biggest subplot from an on-the-field standpoint for that game. TCU, kind of similar to their game against Colorado a few years ago, like you just don't know what the personnel groupings are going to look like. You don't know what this team's going to look like. You can watch film from other schools, and they should have a better idea of maybe how to prepare, given their experience against Colorado a few years back with all that roster turnover. But there's some questions that just won't be answered until the game actually starts. In TCU's case, there will be some wrinkles, but I mean, for the most part, you know what they're going to do. You know what they're going to get out there and hang their hat on. They're going to throw the ball all over the place. So Bill Belichick has the opportunity this offseason to develop a game plan that's going to limit those opportunities. And it'll be interesting to see like how TCU responds to that and how they kind of counter that once the game starts. And then SMU, I mean, they embarrassed the Frogs last season. TCU's got to get them back. And also they played in the college football playoff. Now, I think there was roster turnover there too, especially along their defensive line. Kevin Jennings, you know, we'll kind of see how comfortable he is in year 2. People have some film on him now. That was his first start against TCU. And they did a great job running the ball, and they never got away from it. I mean, they ran the ball successfully, and they said, okay, this is what we're going to do for the rest of the game. But a big opportunity in those first 3 weeks to show how good you are. If you can get out of that 3-0, then I think we're talking about high expectations for this team for the rest of the season, even with a tough Big 12 schedule ahead, playing like Colorado, BYU, Iowa State. But there's good things coming for TCU football this year. I agree with you. And if not, then some major questions are going to have to be answered next offseason. John Rothstein, who covers college basketball for CBS Sports, he's constantly updating his top 45 power rankings, poll, whatever you want to call it. And he's got TCU at 44, which I know is not like, hey, let's all hang the banner. But given their struggles the last couple of years, I do think it's significant. I'm starting to get optimistic about Brock Harding, a point guard from Iowa coming over, LT, the small forward from Oregon State, who's a shooter. They got more shooting on this team. Jaden Pierre, can you create more positive, efficient offensive opportunities for him that would allow him to go score? Because at Providence, he showed an ability to go score the ball. So I like where this team is at. I feel like philosophically, the way basketball is changing and the pace and space, like this is a group that should be more well suited to do that. And hopefully Coach Dixon can get them to buy in on defense at a higher level, because that's something that's been missing too the last few years. That was such a identity of this team and his programs when they've been at their best. Quickly before we go, and I'll remind you guys on Friday. So in the month of June, the Locked On Network allows us to go into what they call off-season format. 1 month out of the year, we do 3 shows a week instead of 5 shows a week. So starting on Monday, I will post Monday, Wednesday, Friday through the month of June, and then we'll return to normal programming in July. Now, that being said, like if there's crazy news, I am always willing and able to jump in and talk about it. So if something happens and I need to post an episode on a Tuesday, then I'll do that. But it's just a kind of a brief break from the craziness of 5 days a week, and then we'll just get right back into it. in July, and we'll run that into football season. So be on the lookout for that. I'll remind you guys again on Friday. Thank you for watching or listening to the show. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also find us on your favorite podcast platform.